Since he died in 1982, Philip K. Dick has become, and has remained, one of the best-known science fiction writers of all time. He has recognition not only from established fans of SF, but also from more general audiences. Very unusual for a writer who started out publishing in ace doubles in the 1950s. To a significant extent, that wide acceptance has to do with the film adaptations of Dick's work, which began with Blade Runner, released shortly after he died. This episode focuses on the novel that inspired that film, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, published at the midpoint of PKD's career in 1968. It's an iconic SF classic of the 1960s, packed with brilliant speculations and questionings of the author's favourite themes and a deep philosophical insight. Philip K. Dick is that rare thing, a science fiction writer and a household name. His favoured themes are associated so strongly with his work that the term Dickian is used to invoke them: paranoia, identity, and simulation. Yet it's often argued that without the film adaptation released 4 months after his death, Dick could have fallen into obscurity. But this isn't about that film. It's about the landmark novel that inspired it, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, published in 1968. By that time, Dick had already published more than 20 novels and numerous short stories. He had explored extensively some of SF's most favoured concepts, and Do Androids Dream returns to some of these. It's a story about robots, off-world colonies, and dystopia, but it deploys these elements in a distinctive new way. This is a cleverly disconcerting novel without easy answers, which challenges our notions about authenticity, empathy, and nature. It also plays fruitfully with the conventions of noir in a way that anticipates cyberpunk. It may be true that Dick would have remained an obscure figure in the general consciousness if Do Androids Dream had not been adapted for the screen. Even then, this one novel would secure him a place in the SF canon. By 1992, or 2021 in some later editions of the novel, the Earth's ecosystem has been irreparably damaged by a catastrophic war. Most animal species have been driven to extinction by fallout, and many humans have emigrated to off-world colonies, including on Mars. The state encourages emigration by promising a sophisticated android servant to each person who leaves Earth behind. Of those people that remain in an increasingly depopulated world, many are classified as specials, considered to be of low intelligence and restricted to menial jobs. Rick Deckard lives in San Francisco, parts of which already resemble a crumbling ghost town. He has a failing marriage, a robot sheep that lives on his roof as a status symbol, and an unusual job. He is a bounty hunter for the San Francisco Police Department, tasked with hunting down and eliminating androids who've escaped servitude on the colonies and have fled to Earth. When his colleague Dave Holden is hospitalized in a confrontation with a formidable new Nexus 6 model android, Deckard is sent to finish off the group that Holden was tracking. If Deckard can retire the androids, he stands to earn a handsome bounty, one he could use to purchase a vanishingly rare, real live animal and elevate his social standing. Unfortunately, the new model so closely resembles a human being that it may even be able to pass the Voight-Kampff test that's meant to make this distinction. As the hunt goes on, Deckard descends into a fog of confusion and paranoia as he struggles to make sense of his mission, his life, and the world. The basic plot and tone of the novel have strong resonances with hard-boiled detective fiction, and the film noir versions of those kinds of stories. Deckard is the classic cop figure, a solitary pursuer of outlaws, in this case led by the domineering android Roy Beatty. Rachel Rosen is in the femme fatale role, an alluring android uniquely able to reside on Earth legally. J.R. Isidore is a special, a largely helpless victim figure who falls under the control of the fugitives. Like classic noir fiction, Dick's novel revels in its sense of alienation, confusion, and moral greyness. Descartes is in a constant struggle to determine right from wrong and to decide on his next course of action. His colleague Resch, also a bounty hunter, is for a time unable to tell whether he himself is an android. The increasingly deserted city of San Francisco, bereft of animal life, is a suitably alienating venue in which the plot plays out. In large part, the novel is a fascinating SF exploration of the concept of authenticity. In the opening chapter, Descartes and his wife discuss how best to use their Penfield mood organ, a device which allows them to program their own feelings. This raises the question of to what extent these emotions are authentic, given that they're artificially provoked. Perhaps they are in some sense fake, but perhaps this is true of many of our own feelings. Descartes' life is defined by the borderline between authenticity and inauthenticity. Like many people, he owns a synthetic animal, but covets the real thing. All owners of electric animals pretend that these substitutes are in fact genuine. Whole classes of society are involved in a mutual deception to shore up their own social status. Perhaps Dick is suggesting that social status itself is a kind of deception, entered into willingly. The androids on Earth have no rights and are marked for death precisely because they are simulacra. They are not human beings. But Descartes finds that even with the Voigt-Kampff test, he cannot necessarily make this supposedly important distinction. In this way, the novel thoroughly scrambles and complicates the notions of authenticity and personhood. Descartes' confusion goes right to the core of his being. If androids essentially are human, then he's not a protector of the community, but just a grubby killer for hire. Closely linked with the theme of authenticity is Dick's exploration of empathy, which is critical to the novel. The Voigt-Kampff test is essentially a gauge of empathy, and empathy is at the core of Mercerism, a neo-religion that's mediated by a virtual reality simulation. Late in the novel, it's suggested that this simulation is fake on more than one level. The novel explicitly refers to the sphere of empathic identification. This describes the categories into which humans place other entities. They're either within the sphere, and therefore worthy of empathy, or outside the sphere, and therefore undeserving of empathy. Descartes' whole worldview is predicated on the idea that humans are within the sphere and androids are outside. Again, Dick ruthlessly complicates this. Descartes finds himself empathizing with those he believes to be androids, and his colleague Resch finds himself lacking in empathy to the point where he suspects himself of being an android. Again, this has troubling implications for the real world, not just in 1968, but today. In the novel, androids and specials are brutally exploited and denied rights. In the real world, millions of people are exploited in similar ways because society considers them outside the sphere of empathic identification. How else can we explain the persistence of poverty, exploitation, and suffering? If the capacity for genuine empathy is a precondition for humanity, then surely the behaviour of our leaders does not inspire confidence. If people cannot take better care of each other and our environment, we may be on course for a world as ruined as Dick imagines, and without the benefit of off-world colonies to run to, nor sophisticated androids to exploit. Brian Aldiss captured the appeal of Do Androids Dream, describing it as simply written but leaving all kinds of resonances in the mind. This is exactly so. Dick's novel is brisk and efficient, as thrilling as the outward shape of its plot implies. But it is also tremendously deep in philosophical terms, posing challenging questions that echo in the mind long after the final page. Published close to the exact midpoint of his career, this novel is a genuine classic written by a master at the height of his abilities. Thanks for listening to this episode. You can find more of my writing in text and audio form at my site andyjohnson.xyz. You can also find me on Twitter at AndyJohnsonUK, and you can support me at patreon.com/AndyJohnson. Catch you next time.